All right, here is chapter 1, about 1306, Junior Biology. I'll be looking at evolution and foundation of biology. Some textbooks call it foundation of life. Some textbooks call it introduction to life. It's all the same thing. Now, so when I think of evolution, look at the word evolve. And what is the bedrock of evolution? What is actually the bedrock that leads to evolution? It is the quest to adapt. So adaptation is actually the bedrock of every evolution that you see, because organisms only they develop new traits as they want to survive in their environment. All right. So evolution is a process of change, and organisms' adaptation to its environment are what's the result of evolution. Now, for example, a beach fly, mouse light, taproot floor act as camouflage for them. So you can see it has as camouflage for them, allowing the mouse to blend with its environment. So when you are seeing this mouse now, it's the same with the environment. And so that will lead to survival. But the issue was that there's need to survive from predation, from predators. And that's what led to that development of the new traits. So inland mice of the same species are darker in color, matching their surrounding. You see that? All right. Now, what is biology? Biology is the study of life. And so biology is the study of life, living things. How does a single cell develop into an organism? We'll be looking at all of that. How does human mind work? We are checking that. How the different form of life in the forest interact. So we'll be looking at how organisms interact. Those are things we'll be considering as we go. Now, we will study biology as we study now. We're going to study at different levels. We study molecules, we study atoms, we study organisms, we study systems. You're going to study all of that as we go in this study. Now, so here is level of organization, and it starts from the lowest one, which you're going to see here, which is number 10, molecules. All right. So if we want to get to the lowest, we talk about atoms first, right? We talk about atoms, then we talk about hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, neon, sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, argon, potassium, and calcium. And that's the first 20 elements, which are the atoms. Then those elements give rise to molecules. When two elements combine together, like hydrogen and hydrogen, give rise to hydrogen molecule. Hydrogen and water give you H2O, which is a molecule. Carbon and oxygen give you carbon dioxide, CO2, which is what you breathe in, carbon dioxide, breathe out rather. Now, then molecules will give rise to organelles, all right? So molecule give rise to organelle, pericytosome, lysosome, Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulum, lysosome, ribosome, all of those are organelles. Then organelles, you know what I call organelles? I call them the smaller cells inside the cell. All right, so organelles will give rise to cells. You talk about the red blood cell, white blood cell, you talk about the nerve cells, you talk about all of the cells that we have in our body. Those are cells. Then we talk about tissues. And tissues, we talk about epithelial tissue, connective tissues, muscle tissues, and nervous tissues. So I call them semen, connective tissue, muscular tissues, epithelial tissues, and nervous tissues. Then tissues that work together to perform specific function give rise to organelles. Organs. And organs, you have the heart, the lungs, the brain, the kidney, the blood vessels, blood, skin. Those are organs. Now, those organs then aggregate together to perform a larger function together to do a bigger project, and we call them organ systems. Now, so those systems, you have the cardiovascular system, which include the cardia, heart, and vascular, blood vessels. So you have blood vessels, and heart in that system. That's cardiovascular system. When you're looking at the skin, you talk about the integumentary system, which include the skin, the nails, the hair, and some gland, the sweat glands. Those are cardio integumentary system. We talk about the urinary system, which include the kidney. That's a ureter. It has a urethra. It has a urinary bladder. Those are urinary system. We talk about digestive system. We talk about reproductive system. Talk about lymphatic system, immune system, digestive system. All of those are systems in our body. Then we also talk about the systems that give rise to organisms. So I am an organism. You are an organism as well. All right. The organism, more organism, population, community, the organism in the environment, ecosystem, then give rise to biosphere, which is the largest level of organization. All right, now emergent properties. Now the result from arrangement and interaction of parts within a system. I'll be talking about that. Let's go. Now, so we'll be looking at systems, how the system works. When you look at the system approach of study, you're looking at how does drug or blood pressure affect the other organs? How does increasing CO2 affect biosphere? How does all of these things impact each other? We are going to look at each of them. Now, I use this analogy when I think about structure and function. Now, some of you would still take anatomy and physiology if you have not taken it now. Anatomy, physiology means structure and function. And we say that the structure determines the function. And I think about it, since I'm still going to teach this in chapter 3 or 4, think about your protein. When temperature rise above 104, what does doctor ask you to do? The doctor asks you to rush to emergency. Why? It's because high temperature is going to break the bond that holds the protein in a particular shape. Your protein must be a three-dimensional shape. Your protein must have a specific shape for them to be functional. And so anything that affects the structure of the protein affects the function of the protein. That is actually what happened in the case of sickle cell when we say that sickle cell anemia, anemia means deficiency of oxygen. So sickle cell anemia simply means something happened to the protein that carries oxygen and it makes it not to be able to carry enough oxygen as it should carry. And that's why we call it anemia. So sickle cell is actually a form of anemia because there's going to be deficiency in the quantity of protein that is supplied to the body because the shape of a protein is affected so it will lead to deficiency in the oxygen supply. That's why we call it sickle cell anemia. It's simply because there was a mutation that affected the structure of a protein. When the structure of proteins are affected, their functions are also impacted. So structure determines function. Now, so the cell is the smallest unit of life that can perform all the activities that Mr. Hay or Professor Hay can also perform. The cell is the smallest unit of life that can perform all the activities that you can perform. And that's why we call the cell the structural and functional unit of life. Structural in that is the smallest unit. Functional is that is the smallest unit that can perform the structure of life, the function of life. All right. So all cells share certain characteristics that are common to them, which we'll be looking at. Now, there are three major portions of a cell that is always the same. And I'll be talking about each of them as we go. Now, there are two types of cells, prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell. We'll be looking at each of them now. Now, eukaryotic cell simply means true cell, a cell that has a true nucleus. Now that means there's a pseudonucleus, or there's a nucleus that is not actually the true one. Now I'll be talking about that. Now, what is an eukaryotic cell? An eukaryotic cell is a cell you are seeing here on this page, the larger cell that you can see here. And I'll discuss this very well before we go. So here is an eukaryotic cell, and this is the cell that you have in your cell. We are eukaryotic organisms. All right. So Professor Hay is an eukaryotic organism. All right. And you are also an eukaryotic organism. Now, eukaryotic cell contain what we call membrane enclosed organelles, and it also contain what we call the nucleus. Now, here is the nucleus of an eukaryotic cell. Here is the nucleus. Now, what is key about this nucleus that is different, that makes it unique, is that it has a nuclear membrane. It has a nuclear membrane. Now, the nuclear membrane is a key feature in eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells have nuclear membrane, whereas prokaryotic cell does not have nuclear membrane. All right. So there's DNA here in the eukaryotic cell, but when you look at this prokaryotic cell as well, there is also DNA here, but the DNA does not have membrane. This picture does not give you a good picture of how the membrane is. Hopefully, I'll show you one later. But eukaryotic cell have nucleus, and the nucleus is enclosed in a double membrane, whereas prokaryotic cell does not have membrane-bound nucleus. It has DNA, but it doesn't have membrane-bound nucleus. I'll show you an analogy before I leave this slide. So there are also a couple of organelles that are there. You have all of these membrane-bound organelles. You have ribosome. You have endoplasmic reticulum. You have lysosome. You have Golgi apparatus. They are they are all membrane-bound organelles that you see pericytosome in eukaryotic cell, but those organelles are not in eukaryotic cell, in prokaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cell, of course, have the DNA, and they also have ribosome because ribosome is the guy that makes protein, and every cell that needs protein needs ribosome, and there's no cell that does not need protein. Every cell that have metabolic activities need protein. It's just like every car. Not every car use gas, but most cars use gas, right? And if they are not using gas, they are using that. Now, that's the way protein is to a car, to a cell. Now, some organelles such as chloroplast are limited only to certain type of cell, which is photosynthetic plants, which are also eukaryotic, because chloroplasts also have double membrane. Membrane organelles are not in prokaryotic cells. Now, prokaryotic cells lack nucleus. You see, they don't have nucleus. Now, do you want to ask me, do they have DNA? Yes, but they don't have nucleus. And I'm going to ask you I'm going to show you a picture that I use to paint what DNA is and what nucleus is in all of those cells. And they also don't have any organelle that have membrane. All their organelles don't have membrane. And now they are also smaller than eukaryotic cell. So I'm going to show you the difference between eukaryotic DNA and eukaryotic nucleus and prokaryotic DNA. Now, I think about it this way. Now, what do you see here? This is a wallet. What are the things you put in the wallet? You put your ID in the wallet. You put some card in the wallet. Sometimes you put some money there. All right. Now, sometimes you put some credit card, and obviously, some people put pictures in their wallet as well. Now, most of the time we go out with these. You go with your license, you go with your credit card, you go with your money, and it's somewhere in your bag or in your pocket. You don't hold the wallet. Now, what is this? Is DNA in prokaryotic cell. This is nucleus in eukaryotic cell. What is the advantage of this over this? The advantage of this is this. This is DNA. This is nucleus. This is in prokaryotic cell. This is in eukaryotic cell. The advantage of this is that you are going to be able to have a lot more stuff. Like I have a lot more stuff in my wallet, more organized, bigger, and more coordinated. That's the same way eukaryotic is to prokaryotic cell. All right, let's go. If you have questions about that, ask me. I'm still going to talk about it more as we go. Yeah. Now, so chromosome contain most of the cell's genetic material in the form of DNA. So, you have in your cell we have DNA, but the DNA it's made up of genes. All right. Now, so I'll tell you about the linkage between DNA, gene, and chromosomes. Now look at this. A DNA molecule holds hundreds or thousands of genes. Each stretch of DNA along a chromosome. So that tells you that chromosome is larger than DNA. And DNA is also larger than genes. So gene make up DNA, DNA makes up chromosome. Does that make sense? So the larger portion is chromosome. Then, so think about it. If this is a chromosome, here will be DNA, and each section will be genes. All right. So a molecule, a DNA molecule holds hundreds of genes. So you see that? So genes make up DNA, DNA makes up chromosome. Right? So genes are what we inherit. Gene is what we inherit. All right. So genes are units of inheritance that transmit information from parents to offspring. Those are genes. Now, as cell grows and divides, the genetic information encoded by DNA directs their development. So, what you inherit from parents is gene. Now, gene is simply a segment that code for a particular trait. Does that make sense? So, a segment that code for a sequence of DNA that code for a particular trait is what we call gene. All right. So think about it. The entire thing, chromosome, DNA, a section of the DNA that code for a particular trait is gene. Another segment. So you have gene for eye color. That is a segment. The next gene can be gene for your height. That is a segment. So a segment of DNA that code for a particular trait is a gene. When I say trait, I mean characteristics, which could be height, it could be skin color, it could be the shape of your nose, the shape of your mouth, the texture of your hair. Any gene, the segment, the portion of DNA that is coding for a particular trait is what we call gene. All right? Now, so you see a DNA is made up of two strands, of two long straight chain. So DNA are double-stranded. So you can see here, this is a strand and this is another strand. So they are double-stranded. Now, on this side, what you are seeing here is a single strand of DNA. Then there's going to be a double strand next to it. So this is a strand of DNA. And then another strand will be opposites. A will pair with T, C will pair with G, T will pair with C, with A. I'll talk about all of that later when we are looking at it. So a DNA molecule is made up of two strands. Each link of its chain is one of the four kind of chemical nucleotide, which is nitrogenous basis, which is what we call adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. I'll write that there so that you can see it. So it's adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. All right. So those are the nitrogenous bases that you see here. Now, DNA provides blueprint for making proteins. Now, there's something we call central dogma of biology, and central dogma of biology says that DNA leads to RNA. I'll put mRNA there. I'll talk about it later. And then proteins. All right. So we call this central dogma of biology. Now, this is still introductory, so we'll get to study as we go. Okay. Now, so that's why I'm saying I'll talk about this later. I'll talk about this later because I'm just laying the foundation. So genes control protein production indirectly using RNA as an intermediary. So it's just saying that this is what is produced from this DNA, which is gene, right? And then before protein can be made, RNA has to be made. Um, Now, gene controlling proteins introduction, I talked about that. Now, gene expression is simply what I have here. This is what we call gene expression. DNA transmitting into mRNA, producing proteins. That is what we call gene expression. Now, what does that mean to us? Gene is not expressed until protein is made. So, if you have a gene inside of you now, you inherited a trait inside of you from your parents. I mean, a gene. If that gene does not produce protein, it is not going to be expressed in your physical manifestation or physical expression. And we'll get to learn that more as we go. Now, when you get to a mall, at the entrance of the mall, you are going to see, most of the time, you see a screen that tells you all the stores in that mall, and you can see where they are located. That is what a genome means. A genome A genome is simply the entire set of gene inside an organism. That is what we call a genome. All right. Human genome and the genome of many other organisms have been sequenced using DNA sequencing machines. Genomics is the study of genes. We call it genomics. And high throughput technologies refers to tools that can help to analyze biological material very rapidly. Bioinformatics use this information using computer tools to store, organize, and analyze the data they receive. All right, let's go. Now, over time, I'll be talking about thermodynamics. I'll be talking about the laws of thermodynamics. And you see here, input of energy mainly from sun will help to transform energy from one form to another. Now, which is the first law of thermodynamics that talks about energy can be transformed from one form another, but it cannot be created nor destroyed. So I'll be talking about that. Talking about photosynthesis, how sunlight comes in and it converts the sunlight to chemical energy, which is what we see as glucose or sugar. All right. Now, what I just talked about now, it's exactly what we call energy flow in a community or energy flow in an ecosystem. Now, energy flow through an ecosystem directly, and it is simply now think about this cycle with me. I told you I'm just introducing, so I'm not like really deeply teaching yet. Now, energy, which is photosynthesis, right? In photosynthesis, sunlight. Look at this now. Sunlight is going to come into the environment. Is going to plant will use the sunlight and capture it to make food. Now, so they make food with it, make chemical energy with it. Now, what's going to happen? The chemical energy, you are going to heat the food, and then you are going to get the food that plant heat, and then you're going to convert it to another form of energy again, which you use to work. And that cycle continues. Think about it now in this other cycle. Plant takes in CO2, they breathe out oxygen, and you taking the oxygen, breathe out CO2. So we call it energy cycling, chemical cycling. All right. So I'll be talking about those things in fragment, but I'll be discussing them in details later as we go into the chapter. So evolution makes sense of everything we know about living organisms. It explains how the pattern of unity and diversity works. It talks about how traits in organisms are transfer from one organism to another, and how different organism has evolved over the years, and they have made changes that are significant to them. So it talks about heritable changes, changes that can be transferred from parent to offspring. All right. Now, very good. So I'll start talking about things briefly here now. Now, there are what we call domain of life, right? The domain of life is what you see here. These are the domain of life. This is the largest classification of organisms, all right? So we have the bacteria, the archaea, and the eukarya. And you know what I just say? I just put it somewhere and I said domain is they. You know what that means? Domain is bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So next time somebody say call you bay, you want to check if it is what it is. If it is bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. All right. Now, what we say is this: the domain bacteria and archaea are both prokaryotic, meaning that they don't have the true nucleus. They have um, they have just DNA, right? They are smaller, they are not complex, they are simpler, they don't have membrane-bound organelles like eukaryotic does. Whereas the domain eukarya, they are the one that makes the eukaryotic organisms. All right? They are larger, they are more complex, they have nucleus, which are double membrane, they have membrane-bound organisms, so they have those endoplasmic reticulum, lysosome, pericytosome. All of those organelles are right inside of them, Golgi apparatus. Now, so the domain eukarya includes the plant, fungi, and animalia. Plants produce their own food by photosynthesis, which is what we just looked at. Fungi absorb nutrients, and animal ingest their food. Let's go. Now, here is just a picture of the domain and how they look like, right? So this is the domain eukarya, and you see it has the kingdom plantae, the kingdom fungi, the kingdom animalia, and you see the protist also around there. All right. Yeah, is the domain bacteria, the domain eukarya, and this is the domain eukarya, the domain archaea. All right, I will. So I will make this on another video just to reduce the complexity.